I used to believe every family reunion was a fresh chance to finally matter. Each summer, when the sun stretched late over Portland's dry lawns and the air buzzed with the promise of barbecue, I'd catch myself hoping this would be the year my father saw me. Some things, of course, don't change, no matter how many times you wish they might. Our house filled up quickly that day in July 2015. Cars lined the curb, trailing laughter and calls of "Hey there," into the yard. Dad was already at the grill, flipping burgers with his world's best dad apron. Brandon and Jason hovered nearby, one tossing a football, the other pretending to help but mostly just soaking up the easy attention. Mom, always graceful under pressure, arranged bowls of salad and chips on the old wooden table, smiling at arriving aunts and cousins as though hosting came naturally. She gave me a quick squeeze on the shoulder before turning back to the kitchen. "You all right, Em?" she murmured, soft enough that only I could hear. I nodded and tucked my handmade card behind my back, its corners creased from too much nervous handling. I'd worked on it for days, choosing blue paper to match Dad's eyes, adding a goofy cartoon of our family, writing a short poem in my loopy handwriting. Next to my brother's gifts, shiny and store-bought, still in branded bags, mine looked painfully humble. I told myself it was the thought that counted. When the first round of burgers was ready, Dad called everyone over. Plates clattered. Brandon showed off his new soccer trophy to the uncles, passing it around like it was Olympic gold. Jason pulled his latest report card from his pocket, grinning as Dad patted his back. "You boys keep making me proud," Dad said, voice booming over the crowd. The adults cheered, a few clapped. I felt my smile falter but forced it wider. When it was finally my turn, I handed Dad the card, waiting for his eyes to light up. He barely glanced at it before muttering, "Thanks, kiddo." He set it aside, already looking back toward the grill as someone called out for more hot dogs. The card landed upside down on the side table, forgotten among ketchup bottles and napkins. A little later, we gathered for family photos. Brandon and Jason jostled for the spot beside Dad, arms thrown around his shoulders. I tried to squeeze in, but a cousin shifted and nudged me to the end. In the snapshots, you can see me half out of the frame, still holding my card. Afterward, I wandered to the edge of the yard, watching as the rest of the family played touch football, my brothers showing off their latest moves. Dad's laughter rang out again and again. During dinner, conversation swirled around Brandon's scholarship and Jason's starting position on the soccer team. Dad told the same stories he always did, about Brandon's first game-winning goal, about Jason outrunning the neighbor's dog as a kid. Everyone listened, hungry for more. When Mom tried to mention my recent art competition, Dad nodded absently. "That's nice," he said, and changed the subject. Mom gave me a gentle, apologetic look. "You know how he gets," she whispered later, squeezing my hand under the table. "Doesn't mean you're not special." But in moments like those, it was hard to believe. The harder I tried to belong, the more invisible I seemed to become. That's something folks don't always tell you about family. Sometimes the sharpest hurts are the ones no one even sees. When dusk fell, and the last slice of watermelon was passed around, Dad stood up to give his customary toast. He raised his glass, smiled at my brothers, and announced, "These boys always make me proud." Brandon and Jason grinned, the crowd hooped. I sat quietly at the end of the table, my card still unopened, the poem unread. I felt small and far away, as if the world had folded in around someone else's happiness. That night, long after everyone had left and the yard was quiet except for the buzz of sprinklers, I lay awake and stared at the shadows on my ceiling. For the first time, I promised myself something. I wouldn't keep chasing approval that never came. I wasn't sure yet what that meant, or what shape my life would take, but I knew I was tired of shrinking to fit someone else's story. Mom came to say goodnight, smoothing my hair with her cool, gentle hands. She didn't say anything about the card or the toast, just kissed my forehead and whispered, "I love you, Em. Always." I let the warmth of her words linger, even as my chest ached with the emptiness Dad left behind. Sometimes I think that's the way life is, one person's blind spot can become another's defining scar. But I also know this, somewhere between longing and letting go, there's a place where you start to grow. That was the night I realized I had to find it for myself. As the house settled into silence and the last traces of laughter faded into the walls, I clutched my forgotten card close, letting the hope in my heart turn, slowly, quietly, into resolve. In the Carter house, my brother's triumphs made headlines, family group texts lit up, dinners turned into celebrations, neighbors dropped by to share in the excitement. My own victories, though, seemed to flutter by like passing thoughts, barely stirring the air at breakfast. By the time I turned 18, I'd grown used to how things worked. Brandon was the star, handsome, focused, captain of the soccer team, the kind of son whose future came pre-approved. Jason, 2 years younger, followed in his footsteps, fast and charming, racking up trophies that glinted from his shelf in the morning light. Me? I was the one who stayed up late, writing stories by the glow of my desk lamp, or sketching the faces of classmates from memory when I should have been memorizing algebra. One spring evening in 2016, our dining room buzzed with celebration. Brandon had just been awarded a full-ride scholarship to Oregon State, and Dad insisted we throw a proper dinner. He grilled steaks, even brought out the good plates we usually saved for Christmas. Uncles toasted. Neighbors dropped in with pies and congratulations. I watched Brandon smile, his cheeks flushed with pride, and tried to join in. When Dad pulled him aside, hand firm on his shoulder, I heard him say, "This is what hard work gets you, son. I'm proud of you." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. A week later, I won first place in a statewide writing contest, a story about growing up in someone else's shadow, though I never told anyone that part. At breakfast, I laid the certificate next to Dad's coffee. He squinted at it, gave a distracted "nice, honey," and turned the page of his newspaper. The certificate stayed on the table all morning, unnoticed, until Mom slipped it into a drawer with a soft, encouraging smile. She made pancakes that day, adding chocolate chips just for me, but even her warmth couldn't erase the chill that came with Dad's indifference. Life in high school moved in seasons. Fall meant football games and marching bands, winter brought science fairs and holiday concerts, and spring returned with college acceptance letters and anxious hopes. Jason's soccer team made it to the state finals, the house filled with the noise of a dozen teammates, parents, and coaches. Dad hosted a party, firing up the barbecue again, stringing lights across the porch. "That's my boy," he cheered, arm around Jason, as the guests hooped and clapped. I watched from the window, sketchbook balanced on my knees, drawing the swirl of lights and shadows across the lawn. It wasn't that I wasn't happy for my brothers, I was, in my quiet way. But I felt like a ghost in my own home, drifting through scenes where I was always out of focus. At the end of my senior year, the letter arrived. A fat envelope from Reed College, congratulating me on my acceptance and modest merit scholarship. I held it in shaking hands, running my thumb over the college crest. At dinner that night, I tried to share the news. "I got in," I said, voice careful. Dad didn't look up. Instead, he turned to Brandon, asking about his summer internship. "What's your first day at the bank?" he asked, pride plain on his face. I let my news slip into the silence, unremarked. Later, in my room, I poured my feelings into my journal, the page filling with sentences that curled and looped into the early hours. I began searching for part-time jobs online, digging through lists of scholarships. If pride and praise weren't coming from home, maybe I could build a future on my own terms. Sometimes Mom found me up late, pen in hand, eyes bleary. She'd sit beside me for a moment, stroking my hair. "You have your own light, Em," she whispered once, brushing a loose strand behind my ear. "You just have to let it shine." Her words landed gently, but couldn't quite fill the hollow left by Dad's silence. Still, there's something to be said for quiet ambition. I mailed applications for a weekend job at the library and a summer art camp, determined to earn my own way. On nights when the house was noisy with celebration, I found solace in my stories and sketches, tiny acts of hope in the shadows. I learned that the world won't always clap for you, but sometimes, the applause you need most comes from within. As spring turned to summer, I folded my acceptance letter and tucked it in my drawer, next to the old certificate Mom had saved. The future was uncertain, but I was done waiting to be noticed. I'd start building my own path, one page, one plan, one small victory at a time. You learn to shrink your dreams, bit by bit, when no one seems to notice them. By the time I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a battered tote for college, I'd become an expert at folding myself small, hopes, plans, even excitement, all kept neatly out of sight. Portland greeted me with its signature drizzle, the air smelling faintly of wet pine and distant coffee shops. The campus looked huge and a little lonely, red brick buildings looming above rows of bikes and rain-spotted flyers for poetry readings. I found my tiny room on the 3rd floor, a narrow bed, a battered desk, and just enough wall space for my sketches and a string of fairy lights. For the first time, my world belonged to me alone. Madison, my new roommate, arrived with an armload of vintage jackets and a wide, infectious smile. She was all energy. Within an hour, she'd hung up posters, brewed herbal tea, and set up a mini speaker playing old Stevie Wonder. "What do you do, Em?" she asked that first evening, feet tucked under her on the faded rug. I hesitated. "I like to draw. And write. And I don't know yet." Madison grinned, nudging my sketchbook. "That's a start." The months that followed were a blur of discovery and uncertainty. I signed up for classes that felt both exciting and intimidating: digital media, creative writing, even an elective in coding. I spent long afternoons tucked in a corner of a bustling cafe, headphones on, balancing readings with sketches and freelance gigs I'd found online. I worked the early shift at the campus library and the late shift cleaning tables at a bakery. My days were busy, but, for the first time, I didn't mind being busy. Nights in Portland were never truly quiet. Raindrops tapped the window as I messaged clients about small design projects, built the first fragile pages of what would become my digital art platform, and swapped stories with Madison. She cheered every little win: my first paid commission, a kind email from a professor, a freelance job that covered rent for the month. In a way, her faith helped me see myself with kinder eyes. Vacations meant returning to the Carter house, where everything felt both familiar and distant. During Thanksgiving, I sat at the big table while Brandon updated everyone about his new internship and Jason recounted a wild soccer match. I waited for my turn, heart thudding as I shared, "I launched my own digital art site last week." Dad looked up, nodded, then said, "That's nice, but real jobs pay the bills." The room chuckled politely, and the moment slipped away, unnoticed as ever. Back at school, Madison waited for me with takeout dumplings and a mug of green tea. I told her about the dinner, the way my words seemed to vanish. She shook her head. "You know, families sometimes can't see what's right in front of them. Doesn't mean it isn't real." Her words stuck with me, softer than comfort, steadier than hope. Between study sessions and rainy walks through campus, I poured myself into my project. I refined my platform late into the night, uploading sketches, coding new features, reaching out to fellow student artists. Sometimes, the work felt endless, other times, I glimpsed a future I'd built with my own hands. Madison kept cheering me on, her ambition contagious, her laughter breaking up the hardest days. I started to realize that real independence isn't about escaping your family, it's about making space for your own voice, even if it trembles at first. One afternoon at a food cart pod, rain drumming on the canvas tent, the air thick with the smell of spicy noodles and fresh coffee, Madison and I celebrated my first 100 users. "You're doing it," she said. "For you. Not for anyone else." Sometimes I missed home, even missed the background noise of being ignored. But each small step away brought a bit more clarity. The world outside the Carter house was bigger, louder, and more forgiving than I'd expected. My dreams, once hidden, began to unfurl, not for applause, but for the quiet pride of knowing I'd started something all my own. That night, as I watched the city lights flicker through rain-streaked windows, Madison turned to me and said, "Let's promise something. From now on, we build for ourselves. No more chasing anyone's approval." I nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in my chest. Looking back, it's funny how invisible seeds can take root where no one expects. Sometimes, all it takes is a little distance, and the courage to begin. Sometimes, silence is heavier than any insult. I learned that during the quiet hours of early adulthood, when applause faded and the only voices left were my own and the city's muted nighttime sounds. By 2020, my apartment was more than a place to sleep, it was the headquarters for a dream I'd only just begun to believe in. Madison and I worked from my kitchen table, laptops side by side, the glow from our screens spilling over takeout containers and notepads filled with messy ideas. At night, we'd collapse onto the thrifted couch, half laughing, half exhausted, talking through updates and hopes for tomorrow. It started small, as these things do, a handful of student artists joining my digital platform, a few more emails from local freelancers curious about our project. Madison dove in headfirst, drawing up contracts and handling social media, her confidence pushing me further than I'd dared go alone. Some days, we celebrated tiny wins, a new user, a positive review. Others, we argued over the direction of our branding or worried about making rent. Still, it was ours. And that made all the difference. The pandemic changed the shape of the world that spring. Suddenly, everything happened through a screen: work, classes, birthdays, even family. On Zoom calls, the Carter clan filled little boxes on my laptop: Dad's study, Mom's kitchen, my brother's dorm rooms, a sea of cousins and family friends. During Thanksgiving, Dad hosted from his armchair, recounting Brandon's internship at a finance firm and Jason's promotion to assistant coach. The virtual table buzzed with jokes and backslapping stories. When I tried to mention our startup's recent grant, the first time our work had been recognized outside a student contest, Dad nodded and pivoted to Jason's soccer stats. "That's great, honey. Jason, tell them about the tournament last week." Sometimes, I caught Mom's eyes on the screen, soft and apologetic, her words drowned out by Dad's enthusiasm for the boys. She called me later, just the two of us, asking about the magazine article we'd been featured in. "I found it online, she said. "It's wonderful. You know, I'm proud of you." Her voice felt like a hug across the miles. Our days fell into a rhythm, mornings spent sending proposals to potential clients, afternoons coding new features or troubleshooting bugs, evenings with cold pizza or microwave ramen as we strategized next steps. Madison was tireless, her laughter filling our cramped space with warmth. On Fridays, we splurged on dumplings from the food cart down the street and toasted with cheap ginger ale, imagining ourselves as tech founders in the making. We celebrated small victories, a glowing testimonial from an artist in Seattle, our first international user, the arrival of the grant funds in our business account. There was a brief flurry when Portland Create, a local magazine, ran a 2-paragraph blurb about our innovative new platform for emerging artists. Madison read it out loud 3 times, waving her phone in triumph. I saved the clipping and pinned it above my desk. But family milestones played out differently. On holiday Zoom calls, Dad still lit up most for Brandon's and Jason's updates. Brandon had landed a spot in a leadership program. Jason's high school soccer team made the playoffs. Dad told and retold their stories, filling the digital air with pride. My successes, however real, drifted by like background noise. I would be lying if I said it didn't hurt. Sometimes, I'd close my laptop after a call and feel the old ache settle in, the same invisible place it always had. But as the world slowed down and narrowed to my apartment and Madison's optimism, I noticed something shift. For the first time, I didn't measure my days by Dad's reaction. Each milestone was mine, regardless of who clapped for it. New Year's Eve came quietly that year. No big parties, no family gatherings, just Madison and me, a pair of cheap party hats, and a shared pint of Rocky Road. The city's usual fireworks were replaced by distant pops and the occasional whoop from a neighbor's balcony. As midnight approached, we looked back at a year that had been strange and hard but, in its way, transformative. I stood by the window, watching rain trace silver lines down the glass, and felt a peace settle in my chest. I'd built something real and good. I didn't need Dad's approval to see it anymore. Madison nudged me, grinning. "You know what we should do next," she said. "The West Coast Tech Open. It's huge, Em. If we're ever going to take a leap, this is it." I hesitated, nerves fluttering, but I saw in her eyes the same faith she'd always had in me. We raised our glasses, ginger ale, slightly flat by then, and toasted to new beginnings. "Here's to doing things our way," I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. Madison hooped, fireworks or not. "There's a saying I heard once, you can't pour from an empty cup." That winter, as the world stayed small, I learned how to fill mine. In the laughter of a friend, the thrill of a creative risk, the quiet pride of seeing your own name in print. Even in silence, I realized, you can hear the start of something true. The next day, we pulled up the application for the tech competition. It was daunting, but so was everything worth doing. As Madison typed out our pitch, I smiled, ready for the storm, and whatever came after. I never realized how much quiet strength lived in perseverance, until perseverance was all I had left. In 2022, Portland spring felt sharp and restless. The city was coming back to life, flowers fighting through cracks in the pavement, and so was I, in my own way. Madison and I had moved our little startup from the kitchen table to a windowless corner in a tech incubator downtown. It was hardly glamorous, just 2 battered desks, a shared coffee pot, and the hum of other dreamers typing through the night, but it was ours. Every morning, as we unlocked the building, I felt a little thrill. Our logo was taped above our workstation, crooked but proud. Tracy, our startup mentor, swept in like a storm every Thursday, quick, sharp, no time for self-doubt. She wore running shoes and carried a battered leather bag, her laugh big and her criticism honest. "You want to play in the real world, girls? Pitch bolder. Take risks. No one gets remembered for playing it safe." She pushed us, sometimes to frustration, sometimes to the edge of what I thought I could handle. But she also believed in us in a way that made me want to rise to her challenge. With Tracy's coaching, Madison and I refined our pitch. We practiced in empty conference rooms, timed ourselves between sips of burnt coffee, rewrote slides late into the night. The big day came on a gray Tuesday. We stood in front of a room of investors, nerves humming in my veins like static. Madison introduced us with her usual poise. I talked about our growth, our users, the vision I'd dreamed up in the quiet hours years ago. By the end, my hands were shaking, but I didn't stumble. 2 weeks later, we got the call, seed funding. The numbers weren't life-changing, but they meant possibility, the chance to hire help, to pay ourselves more than ramen money. Madison danced me around the tiny office. Look at us. Real founders. Even Tracy, who rarely smiled, hugged us both and said, "Now, don't waste it." Not every day felt like victory. The work piled up, bug fixes, onboarding clients, contracts. Sometimes it felt like swimming upstream. My family faded further into the background. I called home less, busy with deadlines. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I made the trip to the Carter house out of habit more than longing. The familiar sights, the faded autumn wreath on the door, the hum of the oven, Mom's careful voice, reminded me how much I'd changed. Dinner was the usual show. Brandon discussed his recent promotion, Jason showed off photos from his soccer camp. Dad was in his element, telling and retelling their achievements for anyone willing to listen. When Mom gently mentioned my company, Dad smiled thinly. "Sure, but tech stuff is risky. I just hope she has a backup plan." I bit my tongue, let the comment pass. The more I succeeded, the less I needed him to see it. After dinner, as dishes clattered and the house quieted, Mom pressed a folded note into my hand. I read it in the car, engine idling. Just 6 words, "I see you, even if he doesn't." I blinked back tears, letting her simple kindness steady me. There's a comfort in being seen, even briefly. Back in Portland, Tracy pushed us harder. "Time to go bigger, Emily. Reach higher. You'll survive a few bruises." I wasn't sure I wanted to, but she was right. If I wanted to build something lasting, I'd have to take bigger swings. We signed new clients, expanded features, and tried to keep up. It wasn't all smooth sailing. One week, a client we trusted disappeared without paying, leaving us scrambling to cover bills. My confidence took a hit, so did our bank account. I stayed late at the office, staring at spreadsheets, too tired to cry. Madison found me there, sitting in the dark. She set a warm cup of tea beside my hand and just sat with me, her quiet presence saying what words couldn't. "You're not alone in this," she said, finally. "And you're not going to quit. I know you." Sometimes, you don't need a pep talk, just someone steady when the world feels shaky. We made it through. The next month brought new opportunities, better clients, and the small but real proof that perseverance, silent, sometimes painful, does add up. One evening, as I updated our project dashboard, my phone buzzed with a new email. The subject line was unmistakable, Carter Family Reunion Invitation. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, to pretend I hadn't seen it. The other part, braver than before, was curious what would happen if I went. Would anything have changed? Or was it just unfinished business? Going home isn't always about forgiveness. Sometimes it's about unfinished business, and the ache of old stories begging for an ending. That's what echoed in my mind as I sat at my desk, the spring sunlight spilling across my laptop, staring at the invitation to the Carter family reunion. The email had been waiting for days, its subject line bold and insistent, like a challenge I couldn't ignore. Madison noticed my distraction one afternoon as we walked through the city park, cherry trees in bloom overhead. She nudged my shoulder. "Are you going?" I hesitated, weighing the invitation's unspoken weight. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's complicated." Part of me wants to see if anything's changed. The other part, my voice trailed off, tangled in old doubts. Madison didn't rush me. She let the silence linger, her step steady beside mine. You know you don't have to go, she said. But if you do, you're not that girl anymore, Em. You don't need their approval. Her words felt true, and I clung to them in the restless weeks that followed. In the quiet of my office, I sifted through memories, holiday dinners where I'd faded into the wallpaper, Dad's booming praise for my brothers, Mom's careful glances that said everything she couldn't say aloud. I thought of the new life I'd built, a company, a community, friendships that ran deeper than blood. But the old ache was stubborn, refusing to fade. Maybe returning wasn't about changing the past, but claiming my place in the present. Eventually, I made my decision. I would go, on my own terms. I chose my outfit carefully, comfortable but confident, a dress in deep green that brought out my eyes, a pair of simple earrings Mom had given me years ago. In my bag, I packed a small gift for Dad, a custom pen engraved with words I wished he'd once said to me, "I'm proud of you." It wasn't a peace offering, it was a symbol. Proof that I could show up without needing anything in return. The days before the reunion, the Carter house buzzed with preparation. Mom's voice was warm but rushed on our call, the sounds of clattering pans and distant laughter in the background. Everyone's coming, Em. Brandon's bringing his fiancée. Jason's flying in Friday. Dad's voice boomed somewhere off-screen, trading jokes with my brothers, talking up their latest accomplishments. I could hear the pride in every syllable. When Mom asked about my work, her voice softened. I've been following your updates, you know. I hope you know how much that means to me. I smiled, letting her words soak in. On the morning of the reunion, I paused at the door, nerves flickering in my stomach. Madison texted me a simple "You've got this." I replied with a shaky smiley, then set out. The Carter house looked the same as always, manicured lawn, flag fluttering on the porch, the old oak tree casting long shadows across the walkway. I could smell cut grass, grilling meat, the sharp sweetness of Mom's lemonade drifting through the open windows. The laughter was louder as I approached, Brandon showing off pictures on his phone, Jason tossing a football with cousins, Dad presiding over the grill, apron crisp and pride unmistakable. Inside, the air buzzed with reunion rituals. Plates stacked high with barbecue, potato salad, buttered corn. Relatives greeted me warmly but with a hint of polite surprise, like I was a guest in my own childhood home. I slipped into my old rhythm, listening, smiling, letting conversations swirl around me. The family roles were on display, Brandon, the accomplished one, Jason, the golden child, Dad, the master of ceremonies. I caught Mom's eye across the room. She offered a small, knowing nod. But I felt different, quieter, but stronger. I wasn't shrinking into corners anymore. I took my time, helped set the table, shared stories when asked. The gift for Dad waited in my bag, a quiet reminder of who I'd become. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere thickened, a mix of comfort and awkwardness, old habits and new distances. The smells of barbecue mingled with the perfume of peonies on the sideboard, the clink of silverware mixed with bursts of laughter and the occasional hush of memory. I caught myself smiling at old jokes, marveling at how much I'd missed and how much I'd outgrown. Finally, Dad called for attention, his voice booming over the crowd. Everyone, glasses up. To my children, the pride of my life. There was a beat, a ripple of anticipation and unease. I felt the weight of every old wound settle in my chest, but I also felt my own strength, steady and unyielding. The room stilled, glasses raised, waiting for the next words. I drew a breath, ready for whatever came next. I thought nothing my father said could still cut me, not after all these years and all those slights that had become routine. But there are some wounds that never really heal. They just learn to hide until something rips them open again, sometimes in front of everyone. By late spring, the Carter family reunion was in full swing. Our backyard had never looked more festive, folding tables heaped with food, lemonade pitchers sweating in the sun, a crowd of cousins and aunts jostling for the best spot in the shade. Brandon was the center of a noisy cluster near the grill, fielding questions about his new company with easy charm. Jason laughed with a group by the hedge, animatedly describing his first months as a coach. Every few minutes, Dad's voice rang out, punctuating someone else's accomplishment with applause or a backslap. In the photos, you'd see a house bursting with life, but if you looked closer, you'd find me at the margins, smiling, helping, but never quite part of the story. The afternoon moved in its old familiar rhythm. I refilled bowls of potato salad, fetched napkins, slipped in and out of conversations. Whenever someone asked about me, it was with polite curiosity, like ticking a box. "And how's your project, Emily?" a cousin asked as she balanced a plate in one hand. Before I could answer, Dad swooped in, hand on my shoulder, his tone indulgent. "Oh, she's always tinkering with something online," he said. "But you know how it is, nothing beats a real job." My cousin smiled, changed the subject. I let the moment pass, feeling the sting like the snap of a rubber band. Inside, the house hummed with small rituals. Brandon's framed diplomas had been shifted front and center on the mantel. Jason's new coaching jacket hung in the hallway, the school colors bright as a banner. I found my gift for Dad, still unopened, sitting next to a stack of coasters. Mom caught my eye as she carried a tray past. Her worried glance lingered a moment, her mouth tight with a worry she wouldn't voice. At some point, the family drifted into the living room for photos. Dad pulled Brandon and Jason to his side, arms around their shoulders. I took my place at the end of the row, careful to keep my smile steady. The photographer, an old family friend, called out, "Say cheese," and the flash went off, freezing us all in our roles for one more year. Dinner that night was loud, the room echoing with laughter and the clatter of dishes. Stories flowed, Brandon's latest business win, Jason's soccer victories, Dad's old anecdotes polished for new listeners. I watched, floating just outside the center, my presence felt but not quite seen. Now and then my phone buzzed in my lap, Madison, checking in. "You okay? Want to step outside for air?" I replied with a small smile, grateful for her distant but steady support. As dessert was cleared, Dad stood and called everyone's attention. His voice boomed above the noise, commanding the room with an authority that always seemed larger than life. "Everyone, glasses up." He beamed, raising his own. "To my children, the pride of my life." There was a ripple of applause, the table crowded with raised glasses. Then he added, with a smirk, "Well, all except the loser." A hush fell. It wasn't just the words, it was the easy way he tossed them out, the laughter that followed, the looks that darted around the table and then, inevitably, landed on me. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. For a moment, time slowed. The sting was sharper for being so public, so unnecessary. All those years of being ignored were one thing. But this was a wound delivered in the open, salt poured for good measure. I didn't look at anyone. Quietly, I folded my napkin, set it down by my plate, and stood. The room froze, forks pausing midair. I smoothed my dress, picked up my phone, Madison's latest message a simple, "You don't have to stay," and made my way to the door. I felt Mom's hand hover toward me but fall short, her eyes wide and apologetic. Outside, the evening air was cool and sharp, full of the smells of grass and charcoal, the fading notes of laughter. I didn't slam the door or raise my voice. I simply left, taking with me only my pride and the knowledge that sometimes, leaving is the strongest thing you can do. Behind me, the house hummed with confusion and whispers. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. I walked out under the stars, letting the old ache shift into something steadier. It was a small freedom, but it was real. Sometimes, walking away is the bravest thing you can do. That thought stayed with me as I drove through the city at dusk, headlights flickering on rain-dark streets, hands tight on the wheel. The hurt from the reunion pressed down heavy, sharper for having played out in front of everyone. I tried to focus on the familiar rhythms of the city, traffic signals blinking, the distant wail of a siren, the neon hum of diners lighting up against the gray. But memories crowded in, Dad's words echoing, laughter at my expense, the stunned hush that followed. Each block took me further from the Carter house, but not from the ache in my chest. I remembered childhood birthdays, small victories ignored, and the way I'd learned to make myself invisible at the family table. Some pains you outgrow. Others, you simply learn to carry differently. By the time I reached my apartment, the sky had deepened to indigo, streaked with the last pale remnants of sunset. I parked, sat in the car for a long moment, and let myself feel it all, anger, sadness, even a strange relief. My phone buzzed. 2 missed calls from Mom, a string of voicemails. I didn't listen. Instead, I texted Madison, "Can I come over?" Her reply came instantly. Always. Madison's place was warm and bright, the air scented with peppermint tea and cinnamon candles. She opened the door before I knocked, arms already outstretched. I let myself collapse into her hug, words tumbling out in broken pieces, how it felt to be humiliated, how tired I was of hoping things would change. Madison listened without interrupting, guiding me to the sofa, tucking a soft blanket around my shoulders. We sat like that for a while, the city sounds muffled by her old windows. Madison poured tea and let me talk until the words ran out. "You're not a loser, Em," she said quietly. "And you don't have to live your story by anyone else's script." The phone vibrated again. I glanced at the screen, voicemail from Mom, this time softer, her voice quivering. "Emily, I'm so sorry. Please call me. We love you. I love you." A twinge of guilt flickered, but mostly I felt hollowed out, tired of being the one to mend broken bridges. A little later, a new message, this time from my aunt. "I saw what happened. You deserve better. Don't let them steal your shine." I wiped my eyes, grateful for the quiet kindness of someone who'd seen too much herself. That night, Madison coaxed me into eating takeout noodles and watching an old movie. Between scenes, she helped me shift the pain into something more useful. "Channel it," she said, sliding my laptop over. "Use that fire. Make something good out of it." I hesitated, then opened a blank document. The keys felt heavy at first, but slowly, purpose grew in the empty space. I started drafting a new proposal, an idea that had been simmering for months, now suddenly urgent. If my father couldn't see my worth, maybe I could show the world instead. Maybe I could even turn the tables, in business if not in love. "I'm done chasing his pride," I whispered, surprising myself with the clarity in my voice. "I'm not a loser, Madison. I never was." She grinned, clinking her mug against mine. "Now you're talking." We worked late into the night, fleshing out the proposal, drawing up timelines, researching clients. Madison's energy was infectious, her belief in me sharper than any old pain. There was a freedom in it, a sense that for the first time I was making choices for myself. Outside, the city grew quiet, but in Madison's living room, we filled the space with hope. Just before bed, I peeked at my company dashboard. Our user numbers were up, new messages in the inbox, a small but steady heartbeat of progress. No fanfare, no applause, just honest, growing momentum. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Sometimes you have to lose the approval you've always chased to find your real strength. That night, I let go of old expectations, letting the ache turn into something steadier, resolve. I knew tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, I rested in the knowledge that I had finally begun to write my own story. You find real freedom the moment you stop begging for a seat at someone else's table. For most of my life, I thought success meant squeezing in wherever there was space, holding my breath so as not to disturb the balance. But I was wrong. All those years in the margins, I was building something of my own, even if I didn't know it yet. Business picked up after that long night at Madison's. The new proposal, birthed from equal parts pain and determination, caught the interest of a few surprising partners. Madison and I worked around the clock, splitting our time between my apartment and the co-working space, refining our pitch decks, responding to emails, troubleshooting code until our eyes ached. Tracy met with us twice a week, her feedback as sharp as ever. It's good, girls. But now's the time to go big. You're ready for it, even if you're scared. She was right about the fear. Our user base was climbing, our inbox humming with new opportunities. But I still felt the old weight, doubtful, hesitant, the ghost of my father's skepticism haunting every late-night planning session. Madison noticed. He doesn't own your future, Em, she said, sliding coffee across the table. You do. Remember that. One rainy morning, Tracy pulled us into a glass-walled conference room. There's a business here in town, she said, tossing a folder on the table. Been around for decades. Family run, but struggling. If you want real growth, you have to think about acquisitions, not just clients. She looked straight at me, her eyes knowing. You can help them, and help yourselves. I know who owns it. I opened the folder and my heart stuttered. My father's company. Anderson Creative. The place where he'd built his career, the place he'd poured all his pride into. The idea seemed ludicrous, almost cruel. I can't, I whispered, pushing the file back. Tracy didn't blink. Why not? Because it's his? Because you're afraid he'll never forgive you? Her voice was soft, not accusing. You're not stealing, Emily. You're saving. And you're leading. That night, I tossed and turned. I thought of all the silent years, all the ways I'd been made to feel small. I thought of the risks I'd already taken, and the company Madison and I had grown from nothing. I thought of my mother's quiet encouragement, Madison's faith, Tracy's challenge. The opportunity was real. The need was real. But could I separate business from family? Could I step fully into my own future, even if it meant stepping onto ground my father thought was only his? Madison found me at the window, city lights shining in the puddles outside. You're allowed to have doubts, Em, she said, voice gentle. But don't let them make your decisions for you. She smiled, reaching for my hand. Whatever you choose, I'm with you. But don't say no because you're afraid. In the days that followed, meetings moved fast. We talked with lawyers, negotiated with investors, reviewed numbers late into the night. My heart pounded through every conversation, but I learned to trust my own voice. Tracy coached me through the hardest calls. Speak your truth. Ask for what you want. You earned this, Emily. In the end, the numbers made sense. The deal was sound. My father's business needed help, and I was in a position to give it, on my terms, and for my company's future. It felt both right and terrifying. The signing was anticlimactic, a plain table in a lawyer's office, a thick stack of documents. My name, typed in bold letters above the line. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I signed, steady and sure. In that instant, the years of self-doubt softened. My business now held a majority stake in Anderson Creative. That night, I walked home through quiet streets, the city still shimmering from rain. The doubts came in waves, but so did a strange peace. I had chosen my own path. I didn't know what the family would say, but I knew I'd acted with purpose. We sent the official letter by registered mail. I wrote it myself, clear and direct. At the top, my name in the company's new letterhead. I imagined Dad's face as he read it, the shock, the confusion, maybe even anger. But for once, his reaction wasn't my anchor. My story was mine now. As the city settled into night, I sipped tea at my window and let myself breathe. Madison texted a string of fireworks emojis, then, proud of you. Always. Tracy's message was simpler, well done, kid. Now go build something unforgettable. Freedom, I realized, sometimes comes disguised as fear. But it's also the reward for every step you take into your own light. It's astonishing how quickly the world can tilt when you finally take the reins. For years, I'd thought power belonged to the ones who spoke the loudest, the ones who filled the room with their certainty. But sitting in my new office, a place with windows I'd chosen, a nameplate on the door that read Emily Carter, CEO, I realized real power is quieter. It moves in the choices you make when no one is watching. The notification went out early Monday. We sent official letters to all company stakeholders, including my father's private home office. I imagined the envelope landing on his desk, the heavy seal, the unfamiliar letterhead at the top. I'd chosen my words carefully, professional, respectful, and undeniable. There was no room for confusion. Anderson Creative now belonged, in majority, to my company. My signature sat next to his at the bottom. At the Carter house, the news hit like a thunderclap. Brandon called first, his voice tight with confusion. Emily, what is this? Dad's pacing the office. He's saying you bought the company? Is this for real? I kept my tone steady. It's real, Brandon. The deal was public. We needed to act fast. It's business. There was silence on the other end, then a low, grudging, guess you always were stubborn. Jason's text was less diplomatic. Did you really do this? Why? I wrote back, because it was the right move for the company, and for me. The hardest part was waiting for Dad's call. It didn't come that first day, or the next. I pictured him at his desk, jaw set, flipping through the paperwork, reading and rereading my name. Mom left 2 voicemails, her voice gentle, torn. Call me, sweetheart. Your father, he just needs time to understand. In the new office, Tracy and Madison rallied around me. You did what had to be done, Tracy said. This is just the start. The rest is just noise. Madison brought in bagels, hung a tiny potted plant in the window, and made me laugh when I needed it most. But at night, when the building emptied and the city quieted, I felt the weight of it, the sharp, dizzying mix of pride, fear, and something like relief. By midweek, the call finally came. Dad's name flashed on my screen, and I let myself breathe once before answering. Emily, he said, and the old thunder was gone, replaced by something strained. I don't understand. How could you do this? To me? To the family? I kept my voice even, heart pounding. This isn't about you, Dad. It's about the company. It was the right business move. A long pause. You could have talked to me. You didn't have to blindside us. For years, you never listened, I replied quietly. Not to me. Not to what I was building. I'm not a loser, Dad. I never was. This is my work, and I'm proud of it. He was silent, breathing heavy. What happens now? Now we work together, if you want to. Or you step aside. It's your choice. But the company is in good hands. After that, the conversation wound down, no shouting, no dramatic finish. Just the quiet, tired end of a battle that had been going on, in one form or another, for my whole life. The family scrambled in the aftermath. Brandon and Jason demanded a meeting. Mom suggested a family dinner. I agreed, on my terms, this time. No more begging for a seat, no more waiting to be invited. We'll meet at my office, I told them. Thursday at noon. Bring any questions you have. I'll answer them all. Tracy smiled when I told her. That's the way. Set the stage, own your space. They'll adjust. Madison squeezed my hand. You've changed, Em. I hope you know that. Quietly, but all the way through. That night, I stood by my window and looked out at the city. I felt different, unshakable, grounded, and yes, quietly proud. I knew there would be more storms, more hard conversations, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had built something out of silence, turned old wounds into strength. I no longer needed anyone to hand me the keys. I had made my own. Sometimes you have to go back, not to close a chapter, but to open your own door. That's what I kept telling myself as I walked up the familiar steps to the Carter house, a folder under my arm and a sense of purpose I'd never had before. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow over the old welcome mat, but everything else felt tense, formal, almost rehearsed. Inside, the living room had been cleared of clutter. The family gathered on the stiff-backed chairs, as if posing for a portrait none of us really wanted to sit for. Dad stood by the fireplace, arms folded, his jaw set. Brandon and Jason sat together, faces wary, while Mom hovered by the sideboard, wringing her hands. Tracy had offered to come, but I'd told her this was something I had to do on my own. The family's lawyer, a woman with calm eyes and a quiet strength, sat at the end of the coffee table, paperwork stacked in neat piles. I took a seat across from my brothers and waited. The silence was brittle, expectant. Dad spoke first, voice cold and clipped. Why, Emily? Why go behind our backs like this? His anger simmered, but there was something else there now. A crack in the old armor, maybe even fear. I met his gaze, steady. This wasn't personal. It was a business decision. Anderson Creative was struggling. I saw a chance to help, to grow, to do what was best for everyone. I did my homework. I made my offer. You could have accepted help sooner, Dad, but you didn't. He shook his head, looking away. You blindsided us. I took a breath. You never saw me, not really. I had to learn to see myself. I'm not here for your pride. I'm here because I know my own worth now, and I'm not ashamed to claim it. Brandon broke the tension, leaning forward. So what happens next? You running the show? You want us out? I shook my head. No. I want us to work together, if you're willing. But things will be different. There will be new boundaries, new expectations. I'm not going to fade into the background anymore. Mom's voice trembled as she finally spoke. I'm sorry, Em. For all the times I let you slip away, for not fighting harder for you. Tears ran down her cheeks, but her eyes were clear. I love you. I always have. I hope you believe that. I did. Maybe for the first time, I truly did. Jason looked down, fiddling with a pen. Guess we all missed it, he muttered. You built something big, Em. I'm sorry, too. The conversation wound on, some hard questions, some silence, no real answers yet. But I didn't shrink, didn't flinch. I spoke my truth, calmly, factually, and let the chips fall where they would. Dad's pride was a fragile thing, and I saw it waver, then fall. I felt empathy, but not regret. Finally, I stood, smoothing the hem of my jacket. I'm leaving now, I said softly. Not because I'm running away, but because I don't have to prove myself anymore. I'm proud of what I've done, with or without your approval. At the door, Mom caught me in a gentle hug, whispering, I love you. I always have. Her embrace was warm, steady, the anchor I'd needed all along. I walked into the cool night, the hush of the neighborhood wrapping around me. For the first time, I felt free, not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped needing to. Freedom feels different when you give it to yourself. For so long, I thought family meant never leaving, never letting go. But life, real life, sometimes means stepping away so you can finally come home to yourself. By the end of 2024, my days looked nothing like the life I'd grown up believing I was destined for. My company had become a fixture in Portland's creative community. We'd outgrown our first office, now sunlight streamed through the glass walls of a modern suite, laughter and the low hum of collaboration drifting through the open space. My name was on the door, but it was the names of everyone working with me that made me proudest. I started mornings with quiet gratitude, coffee in hand, early emails answered, sometimes just pausing at my office window to watch the city wake up. I saw the old neighborhoods, the parks where I'd once wandered, wondering if I'd ever find a place that fit. Now, the world felt open, full of roads I'd built myself. One chilly November afternoon, I met Mom at our favorite cafe near Laurelhurst Park. She was already there, waiting with 2 mugs of tea and a hopeful smile. We talked for a long time, about everything and nothing. She told me about Dad's new hobbies, Brandon's latest travels, Jason's young family. We didn't avoid the hard parts, but neither of us let them take center stage. At one point, she reached across the table, her hand warm over mine. You know, Emily, I was always proud of you. I just wish I'd said it more, sooner. I smiled, letting the words settle in a place that no longer ached. You did your best, Mom. So did I. Maybe that's enough. We hugged outside, her arms holding me close. For the first time, I felt no need to fill the silence with explanations or apologies. We simply were, 2 women, changed by time, both a little wiser, both at peace. Work brought its own joys and stresses. Tracy still checked in, keep your eye on the vision, Emily. Don't let success make you timid, but mostly, she cheered me on from a comfortable distance. Madison remained my co-founder, my anchor, my chosen family. We still had late-night planning sessions, still celebrated wins big and small with cheap takeout and fancy sparkling cider. One Friday, as we watched the sunset from the office balcony, Madison raised her glass. To freedom. To never being invisible again. And to the kind of family we choose. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. To new beginnings. And to believing in ourselves, finally. That evening, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the tall glass doors. No longer a shadow at the edge of the family photo. No longer the loser or the girl who never spoke up. I saw a woman who had made her own place in the world. I smiled, not for anyone else, but for myself. Later, as I packed up to leave, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. Just 4 words, proud of you, always. I read it twice, the ache gone, replaced by a warmth that lingered long after the screen faded. The next morning, Portland greeted me with sunlight and the crisp promise of winter. I stepped out into the bright air, the city alive with possibility. I wasn't sure what came next, but for once, I was ready for it, all of it. Because freedom, I realized, isn't something anyone can give or take away. It's something you claim, quietly, in the life you build for yourself. And that morning, for the first time, I felt truly, fully free. Looking back, I realized that freedom doesn't always mean leaving family behind. It often means learning to value yourself enough to come home on your own terms. Life has taught me that even the quietest among us can find strength, and sometimes, the greatest gift we can offer is simply to listen and care for each other. If my story means anything, I hope it reminds us all that healing and understanding are possible, no matter how long it takes. If this journey touched you, I'd love to hear your own thoughts or family stories. Thank you for sharing these moments with me.